Advice. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another little episode of Dannphan's Advice. Gosh, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I was inspired for this topic, and I'm gonna actually start off this video by doing something a little bit different. I'm gonna talk about what inspired me to make this type of video, because edginess is a concept that people talk about a lot. There was this one particular video that was breaking down what edgy necessarily means, and it was a video that I wasn't really expecting to hear a breakdown of what edgy means to them. It was one of Just Stop's videos talking about Berserk, and kind of doing a video essay on Berserk, but it started off with this whole rant about the term edgy, and basically half the video was him disregarding people who call Berserk edgy, which could have actually been its own video. But I did find it interesting, and I thought, man, that would actually be a pretty good writing video to make, is talking about what edgy means to me and how to avoid some pitfalls that a lot of edgy writers fall into. So first, let's talk about the definition of edgy. Well, the Google definition, at least, defines it as being at the forefront of a trend, experimental or avant-garde. But that definition sucks, because people, when they define something as being edgy, they're not really talking about something that's necessarily experimental. And when the term edgy was first used, it was describing a very particular trend, not just any trend, but a trend that was becoming more and more popular throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And this is the trend of adding dark, deeper themes. So what does edgy mean to me and to many other who use this term? Well, it basically means implementing those dark or pessimistic themes into your story in order to touch upon deeper topics or sometimes social or political issues. The very popular issue that's constantly used when it comes to this type of edgy writing is the no one understands me, going through puberty, going through bullying type of trope. And it's used very often because it's very common, but you'll get these very edgy characters that are very dark and mysterious and no one understands them, because they're trying to hit on that social topic of isolation and bullying, or depression. I guess that's another thing I should mention there. Now, contrary to what a lot of people think, I do not use the term edgy synonymously with bad per se. I don't think just because something is edgy necessarily means that it's bad. I don't think that it's an inherently negative criticism to give something by calling it edgy. In fact, some people, some of you youngsters out there, might not know this, but edgy used to be a term that was very often used to describe something as being good. When people were are out there selling their new video games or new movies, they would describe it as being edgy as a compliment to the media for being experimental, as the Google definition says, because it was a new trend of exploring these darker, pessimistic themes in order to touch on these other social issues. And people thought that was very brave of a lot of new writers out there. So it was actually used as a compliment in many situations, but over the years it's become a lot more of an insult, because arguably there's a lot of new stuff out there that just doesn't know how to do edgy writing well. So there's good edgy and bad edgy, and a very thin line between the two, and you never really know if you're gonna cross over into the bad edgy land. So that's really what this episode of Dannphan's Advice is about. What is separating bad edgy from good edgy? And it's actually a pretty simple, short answer. As you already know, I am a fan of over-exaggeration. I think all writing has some form of exaggeration. We're never just copying and pasting the events of real life. We're always putting our own creative spin on it. However, there is a point to over-exaggeration where it becomes so over-exaggerated that it's no longer believable, or in many cases, it'll just be seen as straight-up parody. And that is the main thing that I think separates good edgy from bad edgy. It's that line that you cross where you've over-exaggerated way too much to the point where it's not believable to your audience, and sometimes you over-exaggerate it to the point where it's comedic to your audience, having the exact opposite effect of what you wanted as a writer. Because the point of adding these edgy themes is to touch upon deeper topics. and, you know, open a conversation, so to say. But if you're just making people laugh, you're not doing what you intended. Now, obviously, I've done a whole other video in which I talk about the big difference between believability and being realistic. So how do we keep it believable despite us wanting to exaggerate certain edgy features? Well, the big thing that is able to keep a story believable is the amount of consistency. So think about the edgy material that you're introducing into your story and think about how it fits in the world that you've already set up. Does it make sense? Can you justify its existence in this story? Does it play a part in the story? Does it succeed in touching upon the topics that you want to touch upon? Or is it jarring? Is it out of place? Does it not hit the mark? For example, a rape gang in a story might make more sense in an apocalyptic setting, while as in a normal everyday high school, it might be a little bit strange. Another thing I think people sometimes forget is contrast can make edgy material more significant, especially when you're trying to hit on those deeper themes. So think about maybe characters that contrast the edgy main character, or ideals that contrast the edgy material. Include some positives along with your negatives. If every single character is edgy, if every single scene or world in your story is nothing but darkness, then people will not really take it seriously. If anything, they're just gonna be numb to all of it, and they'll see it as a bland mesh of the same. Contrast is a really good element in any writing to just make stuff stand out and keep the audience engaged. I suppose one of the most infamous examples out there is My Immortal, the Harry Potter fanfiction. One of the things that kind of crosses the line with My Immortal is the fact that they're trying so hard to be edgy. They're having characters go out of character to all act the same, all act this dark, pessimistic, broody way. One of the most famous lines coming from My Immortal that makes people laugh every time is Dumbledore catching the two main characters having sex, no spoilers to who they are, and Dumbledore's response to this is, "What the fuck are you doing, you motherfuckers?" That doesn't really seem like Dumbledore, does it? But because they want Dumbledore to act more edgy, they're willing to surrender his actual character to have him yelling at the main characters in question. Now, obviously, it is hard to tell how much is too much because person to person will each have their own opinion on how much is too much. Everyone puts their thin line somewhere different, which is all the more reason why you should have test readers for your material, but also you should make sure that those test readers match the audience that you're aiming for when it comes to writing this. Always have an ideal audience in mind whenever you're writing anything, of course, but if you're planning on writing something really edgy, I can give you some pointers on where your audience might be. For example, I've noticed, as have many people out there, that teenagers are more susceptible to edgy writing. And by me pointing this out, it's not meant to be an insult to any teenager out there. Obviously, not every teenager loves edgy writing. They're just more likely to enjoy it. Part of this has to do with that whole fear of growing up, being an adult, and not really knowing what the adult world is like. And I think this fear kind of leads to them just expecting the worst. And when they pick up edgy writing, it kind of validates that feeling. But you know, there's also a lot of hormones involved, and it can be a genuine outlet for those feelings. And I can understand that. I go through depressive episodes myself, and sometimes I want to pick up something that's a little edgier than I would normally read, just because it helps kind of vent out those feelings, get it all out of my system. But let's talk about some examples of edgy writing where it's over-exaggerated too much. I'm sure you yourself can think of a bunch of examples. Leave them down in the comments section. One of the examples I hear very often is Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow the Edgehog, should I say. Part of the reason why he's seen as a bad type of edgy is just because he's this goofy cartoon character who curses and uses guns, and I mean, it could easily be said, yeah, maybe they exaggerated it a little bit too much in the Shadow the Hedgehog game. But some people are all for that over-exaggeration. Another example of edgy being perceived as being too edgy or bad edgy, I know I might get some flack for this one, but I don't really care. Redo of Healer. Have you seen this show? Don't watch it. One example. One scene that really just pushed me over to the edge to the point where I was laughing, despite the fact that what was happening was horrible, but I just couldn't help it because it was just too much. So this character basically just has been raped his whole life. Just because, he entered this hero's party and they locked him in the dungeon and just sent people, just hordes, a whole line of people outside his cell, ready to rape him. But there's one scene in particular in which they're out adventuring one night. The main villain girl kind of forces herself on him and then gets mad that he gets turned on and beats him up, humiliates him, and then like makes him leave her tent. To which another girl, who just kind of, eavesdropped on them kind of having sex, she then forces herself upon him because she's jealous of him for having sex with the other girl. She molests him also. This is before he even gets back to his tent. And then when he finally gets back to his tent, there is a huge muscular man there waiting for him. And then, once again, just raped and beaten. 3 times in one night! Why does everyone want to have sex with this guy? He's not even that hot! But yeah, I fucking lost it. It's one of those things where what's happening is horrible, but it's too much to the point of just being comical. It feels like parody. And that's the main problem with Bad Edgy, is when you get it to that point where people just can't stop laughing. But I'm not against people writing edgy things. I think that if you want to touch on those deeper themes, or if you want to write about these darker pessimistic topics, that's fine. You can write about whatever you want. Whether it's good or not is a whole other argument. And I do somewhat agree with people who say edgy has become too much of an overused term to the point where it's kind of starting to lose its meaning. I use it a lot, I won't lie, but I don't always use it alongside, synonymously with bad. I can say something's edgy without meaning that it's bad. I'm pretty sure that I used that term to describe Chainsaw Man, but I like Chainsaw Man. It's much better criticism when you can explain why something's bad rather than just saying, oh, well, it's edgy. Go into a much deeper explanation of why exactly you felt as though it was bad edgy. What did it over-exaggerate that was too much for you? And I think going into much deeper and more precise critiques like that can very much help writers everywhere. So that's basically my advice when it comes to edgy writing. I don't think that all edgy writing is necessarily bad. I think it's just a matter of knowing how much is too much and, do your best to analyze your own writing, figure out where that line should be, and get other readers to give you their own opinions so you can get a different perspective on everything. But yeah, that's going to end this episode of Dannphan's Advice. Let me know what other topics you want me to cover in future videos down below in the comment section. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, bye! Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. Come here, I got something I want to talk to you about. So a lot of you are subscribed to the channel because you like hearing about different comics and manga. Well, not too long ago, I started my own website, burningstarcomics.net, where I am posting my own comics, along with some comics made by my friends. The goal is to eventually hit every genre, every age group, so that everyone can find what they need on this website. We'll also be campaigning to have some comics printed, which you can always tell if we have a campaign going by checking the description of the videos. So I do hope that you keep an eye on Burning Star Comics and future projects that we have going for it. And if you would like to support it more directly, you can always join the fan club where you can actually get sneak peeks of future comics along with reading some pages before anybody else. So thank you for your support. I'll keep you updated.
Program restart.